Hello, everybody. I'm Pasha Marlowe, and this is the Let Pleasure Be the Measure podcast. And I am thrilled to announce that today's guest is a new friend and one of my most fun friends. And every time I talk to her, I get really excited and all goosebumpy because it's always fun and pleasurable. So today I bring you Dr. Kirsten Milliken.
Woo! You saying my name gives me goosebumps.
Dr. Kirsten Milliken, psychologist, ADHD coach, public speaker, author of PlayDHD, and co-creator of the World of ADHD. All fantastic, phenomenal projects that I can't wait to hear more about. So welcome, Kirsten.
Thank you, Pasha. I'm so glad to talk to you again.
Yay. Kirsten and I used to live in the same city not too long ago, Portland, Maine. But today she is coming to us from Tennessee, her new home, filled with very cool retro decor behind her.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But Kirsten's just one of those people that as soon as I heard about her, I stalked her and then knew I had to meet her. And then as soon as I met her, I'm like, oh, I have a new friend. And then she told me she was moving and I was very upset. But thank goodness we can still connect through podcasting and Zooming and all that. So I'm just so excited to know you. Your work inspires me and helps me reframe my own ADHD.
Nice. Well, I have to say the feeling is mutual, and I have been stalking you as well since we met. So back at you.
So we're stalking each other. How
We
fun.
are.
So I always ask my guests, how do you define pleasure?
Pleasure for me, especially because I work in the world of ADHD, is anything that activates the dopamine in my brain. So anything that makes me feel happy, motivated, interested is pleasure.
Yeah, I love that answer. And so what creates that pleasure and dopamine effect for you most
Oh
these days?
God. I think, well, right now the excitement of setting up a new home
Yeah.
is really fun. I know you were moving soon as well, and always setting up a new space is so exciting to see, like what you can create with a space, how you can arrange things. If I moved into, usually I've moved into houses that need some kind of rehab or some zhuzhing up or whatever. This house has been redone in the last couple of years, so I kind of was a little disappointed that there wasn't going to be that
It
much.
wasn't broken enough.
It wasn't broken enough inside the house, and I was so excited when I went in and saw that they put a really crappy closet system in, like
Oh,
really like beautiful house, all these beautiful appliances and really nice storage systems. And then you come to the master closet and it's just ugly, like cheap. So I was very excited to be able to create a new closet system, and we're going to put that in soon. So
oh, good. Okay, so that's your first project.
that's my first project. And then of course, I've got this like 10-foot long system of shelves here from like the 60s. And I got to set that up. And we've got a bunch of other mid-century furniture that we've been collecting over the years that we're going to get to decorate with. So,
So fun. I see old radios and
oh,
flamingos
we've
and
got radios and flamingos. And one of
lunchbox.
the things to the side here is actually got a television, an old bubble kind of TV that goes on top of it. And oh, I've got Barbie kitchen stuff up here. It's all kinds of
Barbie
stuff.
dream house in your new house.
Yeah.
It's so great to talk to somebody else with ADHD who celebrates it because it's just so much fun. And when I tell people I'm moving again, this will be my 19th move coming up next month, that I'm doing it for fun. They're like, "Why are you
Yes.
moving? Where are you moving to?" I said, "Well, down the street." Why? Because it's fun. Why? Because I get to create a whole new space, redesign my life, redesign my style. They're like,
Yeah.
"What? I mean,
What?
why would you
What?
do that?"
I know. Well, one of our criteria for when I moved, especially since we didn't look for a crappy house that I could rebuild the inside
Yeah.
of, was to have property outside because I want to build a nice garden, and we have these vintage trailers. and I want to set those up and, have them as like maybe little Airbnbs and, oh yeah. So
Fun.
yeah,
So
that'll
much
be fun.
fun.
That'll be fun.
So other than moving, what other crazy thing do you feel like you or other folks with ADHD just embrace that other people think is so bizarre?
Well, right now, that's a hard, it's been a hard one. I think meeting new people, like when you reached out to me, that was just like, the highlight of maybe 2 or 3 months for me is to meet somebody new and dynamic and get to talk to them. And even, connecting with my old friends. I know at the beginning of the pandemic, one of the things that was really exciting was starting to use the opportunity that we all had, because a lot of people were sitting at home, not knowing if they were going to be working, was calling people and connecting with people that I hadn't talked to in a long time, and just having those interactions. I love connecting socially with people,
Yeah.
whether it's at work or just day to day. So not everybody with ADHD obviously loves that. I think we're all a little bit different. There is no one way that ADHD presents. So yeah, I just I've got friends who have ADHD who love doing spreadsheets. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that sounds horrible to me. I'm
That
like,
does sound
what?
horrid.
What? So yeah, I just anything new, novel, social, and when I say social, more like that one-on-one, or a couple people at a time connections, um, creating something new. You and I talked recently about like developing new skills, learning new things, learning about comedy, and just kind of diving headfirst into doing things like that. So um,
Yes.
yeah, anything like that that comes up. Right now I'm reading a book about um, like the history of breathing, and yeah, which is really
It
weird.
sounds really boring.
It right, doesn't the topic sound really boring, but it's actually like really interesting, and learning how over time our breathing system in our body and our facial structures have changed because of how we are, and how that affects our mental health and can in fact mimic symptoms of ADHD. So
That's
which is not the
fascinating.
point of the book. The ADHD part is not, but that's part of what they write about. So
Yeah, well, I assume you see everything through the lens of ADHD
every
now.
time they say ADHD on a page, I'm like, "Whoop, there it is."
It keeps coming back.
It does. It does.
And I've been able to see it recently as a not a pain point or a shame point, but as a like a superhero talent to get a lot of shit done.
Yep.
Um, and it used to really frustrate me that I was multitasking because I felt like I wasn't focusing on one thing. And now I'm just like, well, maybe I'm just the kind of person who's going to focus on a whole lot of things and not necessarily be a quote unquote expert on one, but I really love the diversity and
And seeing where it goes.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
seeing where it goes. So, yeah, I mean, I often think back like, oh, I remember when I was like really heavily into, studying or learning about X, Y, or Z, and I'm like, what was it that I learned? I think that was yesterday. Now I've got this whole new, focus that I'm on. So, yeah, it's always interesting seeing what's going to come up next, and just discovering new things that are going to spark my interest. Because of course, it feels so good to be motivated and excited about something.
Yes, and if you're like me, being bored or not
So,
sparked for a long period of time, well, for me, I go straight into dark
yeah,
depression
depression.
quickly,
Yep.
quickly.
Yep.
And so I have to keep myself actually just a little bit scared, like doing
Yep.
things that are new, but also slightly challenging and outside of my comfort zone to keep my brain engaged.
Yep.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so as a psychologist, are all of your patients ADHD or
No, I actually, so I've worked in a lot of different settings, school settings, nursing home settings. I've worked for the police department, um, but actually, ironically, not very ADHD of me. Over the last 12 years, I have worked primarily either directly for or as a contractor for the Veterans Administration system, doing pension exams with veterans.
Mhm.
So it's you know or people in the military have a very high rate of ADHD compared to the normal population. It just draws people
Hmm.
who have that mindset. because the structure and the, just knowing what's expected of you and what's going to happen next, and also the hands-on, active aspect of the military is very popular with people who have ADHD. Um, so just because I work with that population, I happen to see a lot of people with ADHD and have the opportunity to talk to them about it. I'm not doing treatment with them, but I'm doing pension exams with them. So that feeds me because I get to see somebody new, every hour or so. I'm seeing somebody new and hearing a different story and connecting to a new person. So there's no opportunity for me to get very bored.
No boredom. Yes.
Yep.
Good.
No, it's really great. So,
And
um,
you wrote in your book, I'm not quoting, but the concept
yep.
was that one of the best non-medication interventions for ADHD is play.
It is in
Can you?
all its forms, in all its forms. Well, it goes back to what we were talking about, like what is pleasure, and it's whatever activates the dopamine for you. So whether it's conversation with somebody, or like I really get excited sometimes when I'm doing my writing and I'm really in the groove about saying something or figuring something out. Um, so looking at the times when you feel attentive and motivated and want to continue, which is kind of the definition of play. That's your form of play, and it can be anything.
Mhm.
So, like I said, for that one person that I know, it's doing spreadsheets. That's her play. It's hopefully only one form of play that she does.
You do you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, some people it's cooking, some people it's building things,
Mhm.
whatever. Um, but when you talk to people who have ADHD and say, think of a time when, these challenges weren't there. You felt focused. You felt like your brain was, on. You were motivated. You wanted to continue what you were doing. What was that?
Yes,
And
and
that's your play, and can you repeat that? And sometimes it's hard to repeat. Sometimes you find those novel things that after you've done them a few times, it's not fun anymore, it's not play anymore, but the novelty is what you want to keep on striving for because that's your play. So
so this brings up an interesting question for me. My husband and I both have it, and he likes things like drumming,
yep.
something, a rhythm and a structure. And he reads directions, but I do not. I'm
Right.
allergic to all
Yep.
directions. So we both present completely differently. And
Right.
then just on a more personal level, I'm thinking, okay, the idea of needing to be kind of constantly stimulated in new things. I'm
Right.
just wondering if the incidence of infidelity is greater in relationships where one or both partners have ADHD. Do you know?
Ari Tuckman's actually done a lot of research around sexuality and ADHD. I cannot tell you what all of his outcomes are, except that he expected to find a lot more promiscuity and infidelity. Um, so I'm not sure if he compared the rates among people with ADHD and not, or I know that he looked at a lot of couples where one or both had ADHD. But again, I haven't looked at all of the details of that research and I know it's ongoing for him. It's relatively new in the last few years that he's been looking
Okay.
at that. So
Maybe my next podcast guest.
maybe could be Ari Tuckman. I would be happy to introduce you to him.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think it's fascinating how it affects our relationships socially, sexually, all of it. It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So
And
I
I
was
think
curious.
and I think again, you have to keep in mind that there are different ways that ADHD presents, as you're saying, between you and your husband, very different. Some people are a lot more stimulus seeking. Other people are, not as much. Some people are more expansive. Some people and have more of the hyperactivity. Others have more of the inattention. And I'm not sure if Ari is looking at the different
Hmm,
nuances of the diagnosis and how that affects sexuality.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't think it was him. I can't remember the researcher who said the opposite of perfection is play. And there was a really interesting conversation in there about how perfectionism.
I think it's Sutton Smith. He
Okay.
just died a couple years ago. Yeah.
Okay. And how perfection is tied into shame and I think also a trauma response. And so which would mean that potentially play could help treat
Release that.
trauma and shame and perfectionism. And so do you
Absolutely.
work in that realm with your
When I'm doing coaching, which again is on a very limited basis for many reasons, I was doing it a lot in the past, but I'm not so much now. Um, that was the focus that I was working on, is helping people to figure out, what is activating them, what is play for them, and shame is a big stuck point for a lot of people. First, in just acknowledging, overcoming, the stigma of ADHD, starting to recognize their strengths, and then starting to embrace the idea of actually playing, because there's, just as an adult period, forget an adult with ADHD, there's so many stigmas around playing and having fun, and that's not being an adult. You have to be serious and head down, nose to the grindstone kind of thing.
Mhm.
um, and so, and people with ADHD, of course, often get the message, to stop goofing off, or they're not being serious enough. So that gets kind of ingrained even more deeply than it
Sure.
does for just everyday normal adults,
Yes.
neurotypical adults. Yeah.
It's one of the benefits, because my husband, who's a elementary school teacher, teaches third grade,
Ah,
and he has such a soft spot for kids who are, you know, bouncing off the walls with their creativity and have a lot of
yeah.
ideas, and he sees the gifts in that. So
Yep.
and then to not shame them for this and to embrace it. But then you're right, as we grow up and later in life, we get
Yeah.
more and more encouragement to get back in the box
Right.
and,
Right.
and play small and not expand all of our thoughts. Could you just pick one? How many times has a business coach told me,
Or could you just finish one?
finish one or pick one? I'm
Right.
like, pick
Right.
one of my ideas. Those are
What?
all my,
What? But they're all good.
yeah,
Like,
and
that's
I'm going to do
nice.
them all simultaneously. Just
Right.
watch me.
Right.
My husband and I have a joke, and he says, you could buy a house, sell a house, write a book in the same time it takes me to go to the grocery store. And that's true.
Yeah, there you go. As long as he's walking. And it's a short book.
I'm just glad he goes to the grocery store because I
I
hate
know.
doing that. It's
No, I'm
boring.
with you. I'm with you. I
If they
have
could
good
change
house
the
husbands too.
aisles and put different things in the aisles every time I go, I might want
Uh,
to go, but it's the
I know.
same every
Well,
time.
and now you have to follow the rules in Maine of going down the aisle in one direction.
Following arrows, that's like torture.
It
I
is like torture.
don't like that.
I find ways around the rules, because if you leave your cart at the end, then you can walk down the aisle. It's really just pushing the cart down the aisle the wrong way that's not okay.
Okay, so the carts have to follow the arrows, but
That's my
we
rule.
don't.
That's my rule.
Interesting. Interesting. That's funny. Yeah, I'm going to be ready when the rules lift a little bit.
Yeah,
I follow them, but it's hard. And yes, and then there'll be some frolicking happening soon, Kirsten.
nice, nice. Down in Tennessee, I have to tell you, there's a little too much frolicking happening right now for me. So it's a little unnerving sometimes. But
Oh, with masks off and
yes, with masks. Yes.
yeah, yeah. No, those are the kind of rules I follow because I
Yeah.
actually like people and don't want them to die.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
arrows, I'm like, "Don't." I do
No.
it. I do
Arrows to get to the peas? No, come on. The peas are right there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah.
And then I'm just thinking back to just the idea of going to school and how adverse I was to the idea of coloring in the lines, or that those ridiculous like color in the dots, like put
Yeah.
yellow where there's the ones and green where there's the
Yeah.
twos. Like who created that?
I know. I have
That's
to say, I was very fortunate when I was in elementary school that I had a teacher, Mr. Burgraff, in my third and fourth grade years. And he had an open classroom. And so the gifted students were all in his classroom, in this open classroom. And we had like a rope swing and a piano and beanbag chairs and bunnies. And we had people coming to visit the classroom, and we were going on outings all the time. It was just the most wonderful thing in the whole wide world. And I think about that compared to when my younger son was in, I think it was fourth grade, he had a teacher who was like the polar opposite of Mr. Burgraff, in that she wrote students' names on the boards when they
mm,
didn't turn in their homework. And
mm.
she was constantly critical and, always shaming kids who weren't doing what she thought they should be doing. And it just was a nightmare. She and I came the blows. And I think she ended
There's
up retiring the next year in lieu of me making a formal complaint. So
uh-oh.
yeah,
Yeah, but it
yeah, I just
had to be done.
yeah, yeah. So because kids really do need that reinforcement, that play is a natural state. It's where they're learning at their highest level. And that's true not just for kids, but for everybody. If we're engaged in that playful way, is
Yes.
when we are learning our best and also sharing the best of ourselves. So to tell somebody to stop it, to not play, to not have pleasure, to not feel good, is kind of to tell them, that they shouldn't be doing their best,
Right.
feeling their
And
best.
I grew up not realizing that my innate state is joy. I
Yeah,
somehow thought I had to earn it.
yeah,
And then it wasn't coming, even upon earning what I thought I needed to earn, whether it was
right,
the degrees or the whatever, jobs, children, everything.
right.
And to realize that just from childhood and in schools that lesson should be taught.
Yeah,
We this is supposed to be fun,
right,
this life we're
right.
leading. And when I talk to groups and companies about leading with laughter, there's still this overwhelming belief that if you're leading with laughter, you lose authority
Right.
and that you're seen as,
And you're not working hard.
yes, you're not working hard or too and not productive. And yet, all the research, as I'm sure you know, is showing that if a leader is showing some vulnerability and sense of humor and playfulness, that they actually are more relatable and more trustworthy, and there's more engagement. And you can't have the aha without a ha ha. You
Right,
can't
right,
think with if you're tuning out. So
right.
it's it's not losing authority. It's gaining rapport and
Yeah.
trust in a company. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to sneak this work into the corporate world soon. I'm just manifesting that right now
You're
as we.
also going to have to talk to Gary Ware, who's been doing some of that as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely, absolutely. So I've got
cool.
Ari Tuckman and Gary Ware. I've got to introduce you
You're
to.
gonna have to write these things down
I know.
on one of the many sticky notes all
On
around.
one of I don't have them in front of me. I know. I didn't expect to have to write something down. So, oh, wait, I do. I do. Every
So,
good person with ADHD should have sticky notes in front of them.
oh, whoever invented the sticky note,
Oh,
yes,
God bless them.
my
Oh,
hero.
oh, I
So,
guess I could put another book.
does ADHD tend to run in families? Like,
It does. It's one of the most highly heritable
interesting.
disorders in the diagnostic manual. So,
Okay.
yep, pretty high. So if you've got one parent or both parents with ADHD, you've got a pretty high likelihood that your kids are going to have ADHD. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
And when people talk about neurodivergence, I hope I got that correct, the
Yep.
terminology correctly. Does that include ADHD?
It includes it. It's not just ADHD, but
Right.
it's it can be autism, spectrum disorders. It can be
Hmm.
other learning differences, and
Hmm.
yeah, many different things. And I think when you talk about neurodivergence, they're talking specifically about the difference between people who are neurotypical, who kind of fit a standard learning style and expression. Um, but if you think about it, really, we're all neurodivergent. We all, think in our own way and learn in our own way and have particular ways of expressing ourselves. So we're all a little bit different. Just some of us get diagnosed with something.
Right.
Yeah. So
And the fact that ADHD, sometimes I forget what the acronym actually stands for, but of course at the end of it is disorder. And
right.
so is there a push in the community at all to reframe, rename? I'm just
I think if yeah, with not to rename it, because part of it is that when you get kids who have ADHD in school, in order to access services, there
okay.
has to be a diagnosis.
Okay.
Also, and you have to think too, it's on a spectrum. So some kids have a little bit of it, and they can manage just fine. They don't need any, IEP or any kind of accommodations. And then you get the other end of the spectrum where they need more support, medication maybe, and support outside of school, what have you. And so having that diagnosis does serve a purpose.
Okay.
I think, and then of course there are people though who have the diagnosis and like you and I are embracing how it also makes us extraordinary. And so to think of as a disorder as making you extraordinary kind of doesn't really go together. Um, but there it is. So
Yeah, I wonder if that last D instead of disorder could be diagnoses, and still gain the same services.
it can't, because it won't. I mean,
It would just
you
won't.
have to work within the mental health community, which is under the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, right? It has to be a
Hmm.
disorder. So
Hmm.
yeah. So, but I think that everybody, if you get stuck on the label of it,
Yeah,
then you miss the opportunity to see how it benefits your life and what comes out of it. And a lot of times, kids do struggle when they're in school because there is a rigidity and certain
hmm,
expectations, and a lot of rote learning and a lot of boredom in school, quite
hmm,
frankly. um, and a lot of kids struggle in that, but it doesn't necessarily predict how they're going to do later in life when they have the opportunity to choose their own path, to do things the
exactly.
way that suits them more. And I think, in the last few decades, it's been really impressive how many, post-secondary schools have opportunities to basically create your own curriculum,
Love that.
create your own, diploma. What do you want to get a degree in? And now, of course, with the tech industry, there's just, if you're in that field, there's just unlimited opportunities to express yourself and find what sparks your interest. So
Hmm. Yeah, I think we're progressing. We're progressing.
we're getting there. We're getting
And
there.
um, let's talk medication just for a moment, because I was pretty certain I had ADHD for a long time. And only maybe 8, 9 months ago did I even go into a doctor and say, I have trouble focusing. And she just went down the list, however long the list was, of like, check, 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 check.
See,
No
positive
surprise.
here.
Yeah. She's like 100% certain that you have
Right,
ADHD.
right.
But I had never received the diagnosis. And then, of course, the next thing out of her mouth was, we should get you on medication. And her choice was Adderall. And I also have insomnia. And
Yeah,
so she put me on too high of a dosage, and I felt extremely jittery and I couldn't sleep, even though I took it in the morning.
yeah.
And so now it's a much lower dosage. And I'm just curious, because sometimes when I mention this to friends and colleagues, they say, oh, okay, well, you don't need to medicate yourself just because you have a diagnosis. But it has truly helped me focus throughout the day. I'm still multitasking and doing all the
Right.
things, but I'm able to concentrate on those things and enjoy them a little bit more. There's not as
Yep.
much confusion, but there is shame behind it, even in saying this out loud on the pod. So I'm thinking, I have my own limiting beliefs around it. So what is your opinion or perception on medication on the whole,
I
with it?
think that it is always up to the individual and or their parents. And it's how much of a pain point is this for you, and is it going to benefit you in some way to be on the medication. So I've been on and off medication. I take it some days and I don't on other days, depending on how much of a demand there's going to be on me. um, so I just there's so many kids who struggle and feel shame, and they want to do well. I mean, one of the things that kills me is, again, going back to teachers who are, they struggle with the kids in their classrooms, and then they make the kids feel bad. Why are kids feeling bad about who they are and how they express themselves? And while we would like this ideal world where everybody can be who they are and learn in their own way in school, the reality is you can't always do that. And so if a kid can take a medication that doesn't change who they are, but helps them to adapt to the situation that they have to be in, classroom, and feel better about themselves, then why not?
Hmm.
The study, a lot, I know a lot of parents have worries that their kids will become, addicts, when in fact what the studies are showing is that kids who have ADHD who are on medication have a much lower rate of substance use later in their lives,
Hmm.
uh, because they have learned over time how it feels to be
Hmm.
focused, attentive, in control, not being impulsive and acting out. And so they know the difference,
Hmm.
and they can learn those skills on their own over time, but starting with a medication. So um, I just, we all want to feel good. We all want to do our best. And if that means, Adderall or Ritalin or Concerta or some other medication, um, then, why not be at your best? Why not feel good?
Mhm.
Yeah, I know that too, especially as adults, more often than not, we have anxiety or depression, often associated with a long time of being not treated for ADHD in one way or another. And so a lot of people are on those medications as well.
Right.
Um, and again, I will tell you personally, I've been on an antidepressant on and off for years. About 12 years ago, I went on one because I had a major surgery and I was home for months and months and months and I was depressed. And I just stayed on it. And at the end of 2019, I thought, I'm going to go off of it. This is going to be great. I'm going to finally go off of this. I've been on it long enough. And then, of course, the pandemic hit as I was going off of it.
When you move, Kirsten, your
Yeah,
mic's doing funky things. So every
that
time
was
you
it.
move, I'm just
Oh,
getting a lot of feedback.
oh,
So
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Is that better?
yeah, it's just
It's
when
because
you,
I've got this headphone in. It's okay.
yeah,
So sorry. There you go.
it's okay. It was
So,
just all of a sudden you were moving and it was like,
oh, we don't want that. So, so I went off of the medication, started going off of it. It took 8 months to go off of an antidepressant. And of course, we got into the pandemic and everything was shut down, including me.
yes. Yeah.
And it was, it meant irritability. It meant harder time focusing. I was using Adderall more often. And I finally decided a couple months ago, you know what? I think I need to go back on this.
Mm,
And my doctor just kept saying, like, Kirsten, just go back on it. Like, if you're going to do better, if you want to feel better, just go back on it. And, you know, even though I'm a psychologist and I constantly tell people, do what you need to do, um, it was a point of pride for me that I had gotten myself off of it over 8 months. So, but
yeah.
I have to say, like, I'm happier. I feel better. I'm better to my partner. I'm better at work because I'm back on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just think, it's too bad that our brains and our bodies aren't naturally just doing whatever it takes to help us feel good and do at our 100% best all the time. But I'm grateful for medication. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yes, I've certainly used it many times for myself, for whether it's sleep or depression,
yeah,
anxiety, or
yeah,
now ADHD. And yeah, there's always been a sense of I'd rather not take this.
right,
I'd rather be off of it and be naturally, stable or awake or asleep, whichever I
right,
need to do at the time. And there's there's
yeah,
just times where you need a little bit more
you
support.
do.
Um, Yes, and emotional support and social support. So you had already mentioned as we began that what lights you up is meeting people, but I always reiterate on these podcasts that when it's been hard to access pleasure or laughter or play,
Yeah,
that the very first thing I recommend is reaching out to people, whether you're
yes,
circling up with a group of friends or just reaching out to a therapist or a coach, somebody to listen
yeah,
and help.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank goodness people like you are out there. And if people wanted to reach you, how could they do so?
Well, the first thing I would say is to go find me on World of ADHD.
Okay.
And that's on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm doing that with my creative partner, Christine Mitchell. Also, if any of your listeners have ADHD and they're creative, either writers or artists, we'd love for them to submit something to that campaign. Um, and you can also find me. I've got another business page just under Kirsten Milliken or Dr. Milliken
Okay.
on Facebook. So, yep,
And I'll post the um,
great,
words on
great,
the show notes.
great.
But I was just on the World of ADHD Facebook page, and it's very easy to navigate.
Yep.
And so will that turn into is it a book or an exhibit, or is it within the Facebook page people's submissions?
So if you go on to the worldofadhd.com or worldofadhd.com, we actually have the Gallery of Awesomeness, where we have a lot of artistic and written submissions that people have sent in. And our intention is over time to gather these images and written words together and to put them into a book. Um,
Cool.
we are doing this, we're taking our time with it. We're actually coordinating with CHAD, which is a national organization for people with ADHD. And we're going to put something together for their conference and hopefully get some more attention to it. And again, just, spread the word about all of the incredible things that people with ADHD are doing in the world and how they just make everything better. So, yeah.
Some of the greatest minds and creative talents, I'm sure.
Absolutely. In all different fields,
Yes.
It's just amazing.
So good. I so enjoy talking to you, Kirsten. I'm
You.
glad to see your face, and I might see you in person someday soon.
Maybe
Yay, maybe
tomorrow. I hear there's a
tomorrow.
book signing.
I love it when my guests plug my book, and I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote a book.
Yeah, the book, the book.
The book. Yeah, which is such an ADD title. My next husband will be a lesbian.
Heck
And
yeah.
people are like, what's that about? I'm like, trying new things.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good summary. That's the elevator speech. It's about trying new things. Extrapolate from there.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And actually, the woman who connected us, who is
Yep.
ADHD
Yep.
herself, who's an artist, an author and filmmaker, contributor in the book. So I'm curious now. I have definitely seen, as to the clients who have come to
Yeah.
me lately, like bisexual / fluid /
Yeah.
curious women with ADHD in
Yep.
midlife.
Interesting.
That's my ideal client. So
There
there's
you
a
go.
connection. I'm going to talk to those people you told me to talk to,
Awesome.
because yes, I'm just saying it out loud right now. I think there's probably a connection between ADHD and bisexuality.
You heard it here first
You
from
heard it
Pasha,
here.
Pasha Marlowe.
The sexuality expert who never has sex. Just saying.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Super. So happy to see you.
Me
Thank you
too.
all for joining Kirsten and I today for this talk. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with any of you. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. You can check out my website, pashamarlow.com, or reach out via email, pasha@pashamarlow.com. And if you like this podcast, if you've been enjoying it, please care to review or share. That would be very helpful. Or give us a 5-star review would be super helpful. I'm just going to tell you the structure. Here's what you do. You go on, you give us a 5-star review, and you write some nice words, and then you share it with all your friends.
There you go. All you need is a template.
That's right. The end. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Good to see you, Kirsten. Thanks for coming.
You too. Bye.
Bye.